What's going on, miners, and welcome back to the Hobbyist Miner channel. Well, today you're in for a treat. I have a special guest here. We have Seb's Fintech coming over. Welcome, man. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love our little chats that we have every now and again.
Absolutely. So today, guys, we are going to be going over 5 things we wish we knew before we got into GPU mining. So are you ready, Seb?
I am. And just before we get started, I have something for you here. So you know how like all the big content creators like you on YouTube, like PewDiePie and all that, like they have like nicknames for their fan bases. You know, like PewDiePie calls his the 9-year-old army because the joke is, you know, only 9-year-olds watch PewDiePie. Well, I figured for you, you should call your fan base the Gnomies. You know, like homies, but they're gnomes.
What's going on, Gnomies? Welcome back to the Hobbyist. Awesome. I like it. I might have to use that. We'll see.
Oh, please do.
Alrighty, guys. So let's jump into it. So once again, 5 things we wish we knew before we got into GPU mining. So the very first one is one that is extremely overlooked, and that's electricity and power demand. So what information do you have, Seb, just from your experience of this?
Well, I feel like I get away a little bit easier living in a country with a 240 volt like power grid.
Yep.
But like even so, just knowing, because if you're starting out, you're probably a residential miner, and just knowing things like I've never let anyone know about this, but like I put my first rig on like the same what do you call it, like line
circuit
that circuit exactly that the washer and dryer are on. And whenever they would go on, like my mining rig would die.
Yep. Oh yeah,
it's little things like that, like you have to take into account.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I started out in my basement, unfinished basement. My basement was unfinished, so there was very little plug. So I had a plug over by my sub pump, and I had a plug at my furnace. And so I had to split my mining setup between 2 different circuits. Both, you know, one was 15 amp, or both actually were 15 amp, but those were 120 volt. Well, you can't handle that much power, and so I was popping breakers left and right. It got really bad, and I wasn't keeping in mind the 80-20 rule, which is something from a safety perspective that you definitely want to do. So if you get into it early on, even one rig might overdo it, but definitely start to look at what options you have to add a dedicated circuit for your mining.
Yeah, 100%. And just knowing and learning about how much does your rig actually pull when it's running, and like investing in just one of those little watt meters for the wall. Like it's the best $5 you'll ever spend, or however much they are.
100%. So jumping into number 2 for today is airflow and heat. Oh my gosh. We always, as new miners, underestimate how much heat these things are going to put out. Tell us what your thoughts are.
I mean, when I got started, it was still winter here, and it was just great, you know, warm basement. But then, like, June came around, and all of a sudden, like, my wife is complaining about how warm the house is, and it's like it's unbearable. And so, I mean, just keeping that in mind, especially if you can have that in mind even before you start, so that you can plan out a good way of, because here's the thing, you don't want to be combating the heat that your rigs are putting out with like air conditioning. What you want is you just want airflow. You just want to be exhausting all that heat out and like replace it with room temperature air, right? Yeah,
no, that's excellent. A lot of people quickly go to, I'm just going to use my air conditioner in my home to cool my rigs. The downside is your air conditioner is not meant to counter that. And if you're just using your internal air conditioner and then some type of exhaust, you're literally cooling your house and then throwing it outside, like as it goes through your rig. So I think that's a great point, is that can be tied onto this, is if you can put together a dedicated space outside of your home. And it sounds crazy, but like Seb and I both chat about, you know, where our channels go in the future of our mining, and sheds are in that future, because once you start to get into it, and this will tie into our last one we'll talk about, of adding more and more rigs, you will outgrow your space, not just for power, but also for cooling. and it becomes a lot easier when you have a dedicated location for it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So let's jump into this next one. You brought this one to the table, and that is parts supply and availability.
Absolutely. So this is something that I've ran into many times, and it seems that I just never learn my lesson on this. But like, as you're getting started, please just build up a stock on like the little parts you need for a rig, like risers and maybe like PCI Express power splitters, cables, and just all of those little things, because you never know when you all of a sudden might get your hands on like a couple of new GPUs, and then you get home and you realize, oh, I have these GPUs, I can't plug them in. I've got to wait, a few days like shipping until I can get a new riser here or whatever. And that hurts so bad when you're so excited to plug a new GPU in, but you're just missing this super cheap little thing, and you just can't do it.
Oh yeah, I have a power supply, an ATX power supply, EVGA, and I'm waiting on an M-SATA to come in right now to get 6 cards up and running. And it's like, oh no. But no, I totally agree with you. When I first started to get into this and I decided, hey, I'm going to pursue this further, I went and purchased a number of HP 1200 watt server power supplies. At that time, they were going for $40 a pop. So that was like awesome. So when you find these deals too, eat them up, versus now they're going for like $125 a pop. So it's like, holy cow, like there's a huge difference there. So when you find a sale on something that is one of these necessity components, get a few of them. And if you it'll go a long way. Just like Seb said, I spent earlier this week some time organizing all of my parts and my supplies to figure out like, okay, what do I need? How many do I have of each? And am I ready for my next build? Just so that I'm not in the situation I'm in today, waiting for 2 parts to come in.
Exactly. Like basically, if you can always be one whole rig ahead in terms of everything except GPUs, then you're in a good spot. If you have a CPU to spare, a motherboard to spare, power supply to spare, and all those components, then you won't run into these same issues that we've had, basically.
100%. So moving on to number 4, this one even applies to us all the time, is nothing is as easy as it looks on YouTube. And a video I dropped today, I recorded the first part, I did the build, and then, usually after you do the build, you then kind of circle back around and talk about it. There was a 3-hour difference between there of me troubleshooting this situation. And it's just a great example of like, a lot of YouTubers like ourselves or anyone else may make it look easy, but there's a lot of time spent troubleshooting, researching, and getting into it. And I just find that like, I constantly have to remind myself that like, it is not as easy as what Red Panda Mining shows, or Son of a Tech, or Seb here. Like there is a lot of time between these things, and it can get very frustrating. Would you agree with your experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like when I build a rig in a video, like I try to be as honest and say like the issues I encounter while building it, but I also cannot predict every possible issue that anyone else might run into. So a good example of this is just such a simple thing as like plugging in more than I think 8 GPUs into a single motherboard. Like no matter how you do it, if it's with a 13 GPU motherboard or if it's by using splitters, like there are so many little things that might need changing in terms of like BIOS settings or operating system settings, and they will be unique to your situation. So you have to go into it with sort of like a problem solving mindset.
Yes,
and like trying to learn and trying to see what's going on, rather than just watch a video and then just try to copy it exactly, because it probably won't work.
Yeah, you're right. You don't have the exact same parts and all that stuff. And I think some of the troubleshooting part of it and solving that is really the fun part of GPU mining.
Look, even if you have the exact same parts, it might be that like I have a newer BIOS on my motherboard than you do. so it just won't work for you for some reason until you yourself figure out that you needed to flash a new BIOS on your motherboard.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've had, I was just talking about my RevTech build that I did today. Viewers will be viewing this tomorrow, but I remember when I got into my B250 mining motherboard, and that has 19 GPU slots on it, and you get it, and you're like, all right, great, I'm gonna put 19 GPUs on this. And then you get into it and you go, why am I having issues when I hit 14 to 15 GPUs? And lo and behold, you read the manual, you read some of the fine print. The last 6 slots have to be P100 series cards. And it's like, wait, oh my gosh, it's like, really? So it's one of those challenges where, those are the little things you run into, and those happen all the time. And, but YouTube's your friend. You probably aren't the first person to run into it. So between YouTube, between Reddit, and between, like, for me, HIVEOS's forum, I seem to find a pretty good amount of information there of other fellow GPU miners who have run into those same problems.
Absolutely. And also keep in mind, like, the mining community is one of the most helpful out there. Like, just go on, like, Hobbyist Miners Discord or Misfit Mining Discord and ask for help. And most likely people will be there to help you figure it out.
Yeah, I constantly promote. A lot of people DM me. I leave my DMs open. At least at the size of a content creator I am now, I can still do that. And I remind people, when I'm just not available, I remind people, hey, there's a lot of really smart people in my Discord or the Misfits Mining Discord that are even smarter than me. Feel free to ask your questions in those channels. I mean, I constantly remind people, I started in February. Like, I'm still the new guy.
I mean, same for me.
So moving on from there, our last one, number 5 for today, is mining is addicting. And I wouldn't say, we're putting this as in the same category as alcohol and substance abuse and stuff like that. But I would say that it has some traits that bring you back to wanting more and be adding and growing. So I'll throw this over to you, Seb. Talk about your experience and just kind of what you see and feel.
What we see with mining is especially, like, the numbers go up, and there's one of those, like, high score mentalities a little bit. Like, you see, both in terms of, like, how much coin am I yielding, and you see that, I'm up to 1 Ethereum now, or now it's 1.1, and so on. But also in terms of just, like, your number, like your hash rate number, and it becomes addicting to try to improve those numbers and keep improving them. And you have to know that going into it and, like, sort of check yourself, because this in the end should be, at least to start out, a hobby, and you have to view it as an investment. And as with any investment, you should never put money into it that you cannot afford to lose. It's one of those golden rules, right? So, like, please don't go into, like, credit card debt to afford a bunch of new GPUs, or take out a mortgage on your home to buy, like 3090s or whatever. Like, just view this as a hobby that happens to make you a little bit of money on the side, and do it because it's fun, but don't let it affect your sort of, like, daily life in terms of, like, financially and socially. Like, it can also bring you away from your friends and family, because you keep wanting to mess with your rigs, or hunt for GPUs or whatever it might be.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. I think it's very easy. There are a few things you hit on there. One was the fact of, like, wanting to improve your hash rate. So, like, there's that number, and you've seen someone else do higher, so you want to try to reproduce that. And I constantly have to remind people, like, hey, every card's different, even down to the model, even down to the individual card. So what I'm making on Raven Coin on this card, Seb might not be able to ever accomplish, just because of the way it works out. So don't become obsessed with that number. I think in addition to that, starting out as a hobby is a very good idea. I hate to see, people that jump into this and go, I just took out a loan for 25,000 and I'm going to go do this. And it's like, you may never get that money back, that 25,000. You may never earn that. And so it's very much a start as a hobby. Start with one. I tell people, start with your gaming rigs GPU, if you have one. Like, that's a perfect example. You can use it during the day or whatever when you need it, and then you can mine with it when not. and then grow that into your first 6, GPU rig. But you'll find very quickly that like you want to start to grow. You want to, and I think that that's very common. I mean, but I think taking it day by day. I mean, even between you and I, like we want to go ahead and we want to spend money to go ahead and get more rigs and grow more content and stuff. But it's like wait till payday comes in and you can cash fund that purchase versus just like going into debt to purchase that GPU. I don't think is a wise decision, and it may not pay off. And Red Panda constantly says it all the time. It's like this could crash tomorrow. We could lose everything. And are you still comfortable? And it doesn't affect you, and it's a bummer. That's a constant mindset that I think we as miners need to remind fellow miners, especially getting into the scene, of treat it as a hobby, and don't put all your 401k into it and stuff like that. Like don't make those commitments, because no one can really say what the market's going to look like in next month or 6 months or a year from now.
Exactly. And you wouldn't take out a second mortgage to pay for golf clubs, right? So just in that vein, don't take out a mortgage to buy GPUs, because they're both just hobbies.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. So guys, today we went over 5 things that we wish we knew before we got into mining: power demand, airflow and heat, parts supply and availability. Nothing is as easy as what it says on YouTube. And finally, the addiction that comes with mining. I want to thank Seb for joining us today for this video. Please check out the link down below to his channel. His channel is phenomenal, guys. The amount of hard work he puts into his channel, it makes us look bad. Trust me, it's really, really good. So please go check it out. The link's down below, Seb's Fintech channel. Other than that, guys, thank you guys very much for joining me today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And finally, don't forget to subscribe. Take care.